I got maced.
You got maced.
By the police.
And what happened? You were trying to go inside the Capitol?
I made it like a foot inside and they pushed me out and they maced me.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting episode of You Don't Jazz No Berries. Ding! And I am the host, the Impact Player, and with me, on my left, is Miss Lady K. And today's topic is a special one indeed. So, we're going to cover, do we really have the freedom of speech? And I'll leave it to my colleague to take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Impact. To start us off with today's topic, do we really have freedom of speech? Once again, we need to look at our nation's history to see where the freedom came from, and maybe we can find evidence if the freedom really does exist. I think a good place to start would be the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. What is the United States Constitution, you ask? The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the United States of America. The Constitution, originally comprising 7 articles, delineates the national frame of government. There's a lot of talk about these 7 articles, but I'm here to give you guys a spoiler. In episode 5, we'll be discussing these 7 articles as well as the amendments 2 through 10. But for now, let's stay the course and stick to the topic. Okay, let me give you a short story of it all. The creators of the U.S. Constitution knew that the document was greatly flawed, although it looked and sounded good at the time. So they paved the way for the amendments to be made. Now, let's take a look at what the amendment is and exactly what it does. An amendment is a formal official change made to a law, contract, constitution, or other legal documents. It is based on the verb to amend, which means to change for the better. Amendments can add, remove, or update parts of these agreements. They are often used when it's better to change the document than to write a whole new one. And now, I feel like the stage is set to talk about the First Amendment and what it means to us Americans. Before I start, I know I just gave the definition of the Constitution, but I'd like for you to keep this in mind. If we're living in a time of peace, then what's the need for laws? Why would we need to put them in writing, especially since the human mind cannot account for every individual thing? The First Amendment is actually a part of the Bill of Rights, which was formed December 15th of 1791. Now let's go deeper into the First Amendment. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution prevents the government from making laws which regulate an establishment of religion or would prohibit the free exercise of religion or abridge the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom of assembly, or the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. So, I wonder, does the government and individual states in America uphold the First Amendment?
Okay, I see where this is going. And I'm happy to go next. Actually, I love this show and I love being on here. Did I mention that before, you guys? Alright, let's see if we can find evidence where the government supports the freedom of speech, and let's see if the government provided a reward or compensation for the freedom of speech. I guess the obvious place to start is the printing press and the newspaper. According to the historychannel.com and other internet sources, the very first printing press was developed by a goldsmith and inventor, Johann Gutenberg, who was a political exile from Mainz, Germany, when he began experimenting with printing in Strasbourg, France in 1440. He returned to Mainz several years later by 1450 and had a printing machine perfected and ready to use commercially. He called it the Gutenberg press. The sole purpose of the printing press is a device that allows for mass production of uniform printed matter, mainly text in the form of books, pamphlets, and newspapers. So I think it's safe to say that the newspaper originated in Europe, but mainly Germany. Since this invention was created in Europe, I guess the manuscripts took a while to come to America. So according to Poynter.org and other internet sources, on September 25th, 1690, the first colonial newspaper in America, public occurrence, both foreign and domestic, was published. This is an example of freedom of speech by the freedom of press. And we can see our very first newspaper company being created. America's first independent newspaper company was called the New England Courant. Hopefully I got the pronunciation right. It was established in 1721 by Benjamin Franklin's older brother. Let's take a look at the television set and all the news outlets that we see on TV. According to stevens.hosting.nyu.edu, the television set was first successfully demonstrated in San Francisco on September 7, 1927. The system was designed by Philo Taylor Farnsworth when he was 21 years old. 21 years after this, in 1948, CBS debuted with its regular 15-minute nightly newscast on the rudimentary CBS television network, including dubbed CBS-TV. And now we have social media where you can even advertise illegal activity on this network, like selling marijuana and the likes thereof. As we can see, how long will it take before the government and the powers that be to hijack the news and make them censor as well as keep their mouth shut on certain issues? I must admit, on doing my research, I really had to think outside of the box on this one. But I'm pretty sure the information will come easier in the next segment.
Thanks, Impact. So what if I was to tell you that the freedom of speech isn't actually always free? Second, what if I was to tell you that there's limits to what we can freely say according to the law? I thought that freedom of speech meant you could say absolutely anything without facing any consequences from the government. Well, let's start out with the First Amendment and what it doesn't cover in the freedom of speech clause. According to uscourts.gov and other internet sources, the First Amendment does not cover the incite actions that would harm others, like a threat, to make or distribute obscene materials like gun racketeering, to burn draft cards in anti-war protests, to permit students from printing articles in school newspapers over objections of the school administration, which is huge, students to make an obscene speech at school-sponsored events, and students to advocate illegal drug use at school-sponsored events. But it doesn't stop there. When did the governments and the powers that be start to censor the media outlets? Censorship is the suppression of speech public communication, or other information on the basis that such material is considered objectionable, harmful, sensitive, or inconvenient. Inconvenient? Wow. Censorship in the United States involves the suppression of speech or public communication that raises issues of the freedom of speech, which is protected by the First Amendment in the United States Constitution. Restraints increased during the 1950s, a period of widespread anti-communist sentiment as exemplified by the hearings of the House Committee on Un-American Activities. In Miller versus California in 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court found that the First Amendment's freedom of speech does not apply to obscenity, which can therefore be censored, and not only that, but the First Amendment doesn't protect against corporate censorship. Rumor has it that big-name corporations control the world, so one can understand why censorship is greatly needed on their behalf. The censorship takes form of threats of monetary loss, employment loss, or loss of access to the marketplace. Also, you have a bigger secret to tell. They will hunt you down and give you an ultimatum that you can't refuse. Not only are they censoring what we say, but the news we receive is 9 out of 10 censored as well. According to thoughtco.com and other internet sources, key takeaways in media censorship are the suppression, alteration, or prohibition of written, spoken, or photographic information from books, newspapers, television, and radio reports, and other media sources. The suppression of information considered obscene, pornographic, politically unacceptable, or a threat to national security, to name some reasons. But are these good reasons to keep us away the pure, unadulterated truth? Let's take a look at some of the crimes being committed by just simply running off at the mouth.
Alright, it's time to wrap things up here though. Like my colleague said, we're going to be looking at crimes involving the freedom of speech being taken away from the American public. I guarantee that this will blow your mind, because if you made it this far into the episode, you're probably just as shocked as we are to find out that we never truly had the freedom of speech to begin with. So, prepare yourselves. Let's go in my time machine and let me take you back to 2018 in the land of Tennessee. And let's highlight the court case Thomas versus Bright. According to ivs.gov and other internet sources, William Thomas owned several roadside signs, and Tennessee Department of Transportation, or TDOT, said at first the road signs were too lengthy and ordered him to take them down. A number of these billboards, specifically one that read "The Glory of the Season" during the holidays. This sign was made to cheer on U.S. athletes in the Olympics. But where's the harm in that? The sign they ordered him to take down included this one and the "Support Our Troops" sign. But he had other signs selling fireworks that they said was alright. Kinda ironic that he can promote unsafe acts, but he can't promote supporting a system that forgot about people protecting the American way of life, don't you think? Let's go to 2014 and the state of Connecticut, and let's highlight a court case involving politicians, no less, the so-called lawmakers. Joe Markley and Rob Sampson versus State Election Enforcement Commission, or the SEEC. Not the SEC on CBS, but the SEEC. This case is a ridiculous one indeed, because they basically got fined for no reason. But let's go over the details and make sure, if my opinion is correct. This case began in the run-up to the 2014 election, where State Senator Joe Markley and State Representative Rob Sampson were both running for re-election. The two candidates whose districts overlaps decided to send out a series of standard campaign mailers highlighting their policies in opposition to those of the sitting government, Daniel Morley. The SEEC argues that because the mailers mentioned the governor, these were also ads in opposition to the governor. The cost of the ads therefore needed to be shared by someone running against Morley. The SEEC further argued that since Markley and Sampson participated in the state's public financing program and in doing so signed a form agreeing to follow all Connecticut campaign finance laws. The candidates should have known that in their campaign literature was illegal. The SEEC ultimately ruled that by criticizing the governor's record in mailing, Markley and Sampson had made an illegal expenditure on the behalf of the governor's opponent. I can see why he's not the governor no more. Not only did they have to stop the distribution of their hard-earned work, but Sampson had to pay $5,000 and Markley had to pay $2,000 fine. Not only these two cases, but in 2014 in the state of California, we had Institution for Free Speech versus Berseria. In New Jersey, just last year, we had Mazzo and McCormick versus Way. The University of Central Florida was involved in a scandal that ultimately led to Coach Frost's exit as well. Donald De La Haye was a really good story. I encourage you to go on Facebook and or YouTube to check out a very compelling story of how the NCAA and UCF stepped in and shut this man down. So I have to ask, Miss Lady K, do you have any thoughts?
Well, that's pretty crazy that I haven't heard of any of these cases until now. Also, from the looks of it, there's more research to be done because there are plenty of other cases out there like that. But I won't go into all of those now. I mean, what would the fun be if I didn't leave you to do a little bit of research in your own spare time? I'm just kidding. I bet you're busy. Another thing I thought about was freedom of expression because I feel like that it brings in everything the First Amendment should be about, right? In World War I, people would get put in jail just for handing out anti-war leaflets. And that is one part of history where we can see the First Amendment actually being looked at for the first time. But were those changes enough? Well, I'm not sure those changes were enough, especially looking at the world today. There was even a man that was named Sidney Street who was jailed in 1969 for burning the American flag on Harlem Street corner. He did this because he was protesting the shooting of civil rights figure James Meredith, and he was put in jail for this. Wouldn't that also be considered a form of expression? I'm not saying I'm okay with the expression, but at what point do we stop filtering people's movements? I might be angry one day and mad at someone and be like, I could just kill you right now. But that doesn't mean that I'm gonna do it or even really feel that way. Emotions can sometimes get the best of us, as we all know. But emotions are in everything that we do. And you can't just try to take someone's joy away. Sometimes joy is all a person has for them for that day. And if we keep allowing ourselves to be filtered couldn't we all only but one day not be able to say anything at all? I guess the last thing that I wanted to say is when growing up, and I'm only speaking for myself because I can't speak for anybody else, but I was always told to try to avoid conflict, to always live my life by the rules. Like in school, do what the teacher says or what they tell you to do. Don't break the laws put into place by the police because you don't want to go to jail. And one example is not to fight because the cops could get called. But if it's just a verbal fight and not physical, they can still get called. Why? Because we're disturbing other people's peace. Isn't this taking away from the freedom of speech too? Isn't it healthy to get your emotions out? I mean, if something's frustrating you, if you were just able to scream a little bit and get it out, wouldn't you feel better? But there's always someone there that's trying to tell you not to do it. So your freedom of speech should be imposed on because they don't like the fact that you're yelling. Now, if someone calls the police because of you yelling, who should really go to jail here? The person messing with the other person's freedom of speech, or the person yelling because they don't agree with something? I'll let you think about that. And if you'd like, leave us a comment below. Also, I'm going to pass this back to my man here, Impact, and see what else he has for us today.
In closing, I'd like to tell you two tales. Hopefully this doesn't take too long, but here we go. So back in, what year was it? Back in 2013, I remember going to jail, okay? Oh, I get it. But hey, you know, it seems like, especially if you're black or if you just fit the criteria of being 25 years or younger, you know, you're extremely targeted by law officers in order to put you in prison, you know. So at this time, I definitely was, 25 at this time. So if you like to hear, here you go. So back in 2013, I went to jail. And this is the reason why I went to jail. So I must admit, I went to the convenience store and I bought like a 6-pack. And, you know, I was drinking one of them on the way back home. But that's not why I got pulled over to go to jail. So one of the homies hit me up, and I'll try not to drop any names, but, you know, one of the homies hit me up talking about, hey, you know, I got some bitches in the car. Excuse my language, but he was like, I got some bitches in the car. I got some bitches in the car. Hey, come with me, come with me. So I'm like, you know, cool, get at me, whatever, you know. And darn it if he didn't have these females in the trunk, you know what I'm saying? They, you know, I must admit at the time, they looked really good, you know. And, you know, it's been a while for me, you know. So, yeah, of course, I went over there, you know, thinking that maybe, you know, I could find love or whatever the case may be. And also, I didn't want to walk home, you know. So I get in the car, and of course, you know, they wanted me to be the DJ. So not only am I playing music via the cell phone, but, you know, I grabbed me one of them things, man, and I just start filling up on her, you know. Hey, you know, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just saying, you know, hey, I thought it was good. I thought I had the green light. And, you know, I was just filling up on her and stuff like that, you know. And, but I didn't notice where we were actually going. That's the whole thing. So, basically, after filling up on this girl and stuff like that, I noticed, like, okay, where are we going? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh, snap. And then not only that, but the driver was driving something awful, you know. I was like, man, dog, you gonna get us killed, you know. And sure enough, man, we hit this roundabout, you know what I'm saying? And Buddy drifted out of the roundabout. And when he was drifting, he crashed into the yield sign and tore it up. Okay? Stay with me now, because here's the conclusion to the story. So he pulls the car over. The car is not in park, and then he hit a light pole on top of everything. So not only did the initial crash tore up the yield sign, but he almost crashed and burned the whole street pole, And now the car is just stuck on the street pole, about to tear it up. Okay, everybody leaves the car. They run. The impact player. I'm thinking to myself, oh snap! These people don't deserve this. This car could blow up. Worst case scenario. I need to turn it off. So I hops into the front seat and turn it off. By the time I turned it off, some old ugly fat lady, excuse my language, was like, don't leave. And I'm like, well, fine. I didn't do anything anyways, so it is what it is, right? The cops showed up. And then, I'm black. Not only am I black, but this is how I was raised. If I ain't do nothing, I ain't do nothing. But I'm not going to snitch on the next man. So I didn't. The cops was like, give me a name. Give me a name. And I'm like, bro, no. And basically, they took me to jail saying that since I assumed ownership of the car by turning it off, therefore making me the driver, and they even blamed it on me that I tore up the yield sign and parked the car over there. I even told them I was drinking and stuff like that, and they used that against me as well. Man, I can't believe that. And then the next story that I wanted to go over you guys is, okay, so this happened, last year in 2020. 2020 is such an awful year, and this is one of the reasons why. Okay, so I have a dog, they called the cops on the dog as well, but, we'll get into that a little bit later within the season. But, so as a result of them calling the cops on my dog, I just took it upon myself to not say anything, but videotape everything that went on in my yard, right? Okay, so I'm over here videotaping, and I even got footage of this, so I might even put this in this episode. But so I'm videotaping Buddy. Buddy is yelling obscene language to me on my yard, right? As I'm videotaping the side of the street that I normally park on. Then after this, Buddy, calls the cops on top of everything. Which this right here, when you say people, don't say people, say white people, please. But and only white people could do this. But so he calls the cops. The cops come over to my house, and I didn't say nothing to the cops either. And he was like, okay, we just got a complaint that you were videotaping. I was like, okay, so what's the crime in that? And he was like, okay, well, we can't really tell you to stop videotaping, but make sure you don't leave your house. Make sure you don't leave your house, and if you do, don't say nothing to anybody. I said, look, I didn't say, you know what? Hold on right there. I'm about to go get my video camera, and I'm about to videotape you, and I need you to repeat what you just said. He said, what? You know what? I think I'm good. And then, guess what he did? He went back to the precinct. I know where you work. So, guess what I did as a result of that? I told him, I said, I'm going over to the precinct, and you best be there. And I must admit, Buddy was there, and I talked to his supervisor as a result of that. But like we said before, we want to know what you guys think, so please leave a comment below. In closing, don't forget to visit us at the website, www.theallstargame.wixsite.com/The All-Star Game to get caught up on music and previous episodes that we created thus far. And that's it for today's episode of You Don't Jazz No Berries. Until next time.
What I want to make sure is not lost in this, as we're seeing these remarkable pictures with this law enforcement presence directly behind you, is the why. Why people have been out on the streets protesting. Why this violence is taking place. There is some action behind you. Hang on.
Yep. We've got one person being arrested here. We've got... We're meeting? Yep, we're good. Yep. Hold on. I got you. Hold on. They had us here. We're speaking with State Patrol right now. Give us a second, guys. We can move back to where you'd like. We can move back to where you'd like here. We are live on the air at the moment. This is the four of us. We are one team. Just put us back where you want us. We are getting out of your way, so just let us know. Wherever you'd want us, we will go. We are just getting out of your way when you're advancing through the intersection. So just let us know, and we got you. And this is a scene here playing out in Minneapolis. This is part of the advanced police presence that we saw come over the course of really minutes when the local police showed up at the fire department, or with the fire department, I should say, on that building we showed you that was burning. This is among the State Patrol unit that was advancing up the street, saying and scattering the protesters at that point for people to clear the area. And so we walked away. I'm sorry?
You're under arrest.
Okay. Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir? Why am I under arrest, sir?
Officers with CNN, and he's on the air right now.
Okay.
You are arresting him live on CNN. We told you before that we are with CNN.
If you're just tuning in, you are watching our correspondent, Omar Jimenez, being arrested by state police in Minnesota. We're not sure why our correspondent is being arrested.
Hang on 1 second, Allison. Let's listen into what these officers are saying. That is an American television reporter, Omar Jimenez, being led away by police officers.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of You Don't Jazz No Berries. I'm your host, Lady Karus, and with me is the Impact Playa. Please say the Playa. If you joined us last week, we went over an introduction to Is There Really Freedom of Speech? Today we're coming to you to dig a little bit deeper into our rights. What are they, and how can it help us by knowing them in the long run? Why is this topic so important in the world today? Well, you're about to find out. let me pass this thing over to my man's Impact Player, and he's going to give you the lowdown.
Thanks for the live, Lady K. In the last episode, we really brought some interesting information to you all. We talked about what the amendment is and why are they put into place. We also went over some history about the first printing press created and perfected in Mainz, Germany in 1450. Then we went over the first newspaper, the first television set, and when it was developed. We also covered censorship and corporate censorship. We also went over the reasons that we're here. Don't believe me? Then I encourage you to check out our website that has the latest content free of charge. Are these news outlets being for real, or is it an elaborate stage for fake news? I'll let you be the judge. We also went over the First Amendment is supposed to cover like guaranteeing our freedom of expression by religion, freedom of press, freedom of speech that allows citizens to assemble peacefully and petition their government. Then we covered what does it actually doesn't cover, like any actions that would harm others, like a threat to make or distribute obscene materials, to permit students from printing articles in school newspapers over the objection of school administration, just to name a few. One thing from the last episode that really stuck with me is how many people don't seem to understand censorship. One time I shared a post on Facebook and the same day it was taken down. Then if someone does something like this on that very same platform, they can report you, and when they report you, you won't have access to your account for a few days. This is another form of censorship that is taking away our freedom of speech. Whether this is related to the government, no one will ever know. The last episode we covered some cases that directly involve the freedom of speech, and then the freedom of expression was also talked about as well. If you didn't see episode 4 of You Don't Jazz No Berries, then we highly encourage you to go back and watch it, for it has interesting information about our freedom of speech. I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Lady K, as promised, to go over the articles of the United States Constitution.
Thanks, Impact. So I'm going to start with some information on the U.S. Constitution, and I'm going to focus primarily on the 7 articles. So let's get some more details on what the articles are. The articles are said to work to establish the branches of the federal government and describe what power they have over us. There were actually originally 395 articles in the United States Constitution, which is a lot. The first article, which I'm going to go over here, is the legislative branch and defines what their job entails. Their job, to sum it up, is to make the laws. The legislative branch has 2 different chambers, the House of Representatives and the House of Senate. And these 2 both make up the House of Congress. Congress is a legislative body that holds the power to draft and pass legislation, borrow money for the nation, declare war, and raise a military. It also has the power to check and balance the other 2 branches of the federal government. Article number 2 is the executive branch. They manage the day-to-day governmental operations, and one agency that's included in this branch is the Department of Treasury. And the head of this branch is the President of the United States. Article number 3 is the judicial branch. This outlines the powers given to the federal court system. This states the court of last resort is the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Congress has the power to determine the size and scope of those courts below it. All judges are appointed for life unless they resign due to bad behavior. Who knew? Article 4 is the states. This is where the relationship between the federal and state government is defined. The federal government guarantees a republican form of government in each state, protects the nation and the people from foreign or domestic violence, and determines how many states can join the union. It also makes suggestions that each state is equal and should respect each other's laws. Article 5 is the amendment. This one states the future generations can amend the Constitution if society requires it. Both states and Congress have the power to start this process, which we'll cover shortly. Article 6 is the debts, supremacy, and other branches, which actually determines that the United States Constitution and all the laws made from it are the supreme law of the land. It states that all officials, whether members of the state legislatures, Congress, judiciary, or executive branch, have to swear an oath on the Constitution before being placed in office. And the last and final article is Article number 7. This article gives the detail on all the people who signed the Constitution and represented the original 13 states. Now that you have a breakdown of the articles, let me pass this thing over to Impact, and he can give you some insight on the Bill of Rights and the amendments it contains.
Thanks, Lady K. Now, let's dig right on in. Let's start with the Bill of Rights and when the Bill of Rights was established and what the Bill of Rights actually mean. On September 25th, 1789, the U.S. Congress tried to establish 12 amendments to the Constitution, and 10 of these amendments were approved by 3/5 of the state's legislation on December 15, 1791, and these 10 amendments make up the Bill of Rights as we know today. It is said these 10 amendments will guarantee the civil rights and liberty for each individual, such as the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, and the freedom of religion. Amendments are the way by which any change can be made in the Constitution. This can be for adding, deleting, or modifying an article like we discussed in the previous episode. Now let's go over amendments 2 through 5, shall we? The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. This amendment states that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of free states, which allows people the right to keep and bear arms, and this shall not be infringed upon. This amendment is regularly debated because some argue about who should actually have the right to bear arms. As you can see, it wasn't intended for everyone to have this right, since it's a topic of discussion in today's society. The Third Amendment states that no soldier in a time of peace shall be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, even in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. This amendment basically states that if America is not at war, the government can't make people house soldiers. The Fourth Amendment states that people have the right to secure their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure. The person shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but by obtaining probable cause. The Fourth Amendment is supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things that needs to be seized. In simpler terms, this means the Constitution prohibits unreasonable search and seizures. It also states a judge must approve a search and seizure warrant, and to do so, there has to be probable cause. This is a questionable one due to the no-knock warrants that certain states mandate. So what happened to Breonna Taylor and so many others is downright illegal. But we'll save that topic of discussion for another episode. Then we have the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment states that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on imprisonment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land of naval forces or the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subjected to answer for an offense to be put in jeopardy 2 or more times of life or limb. Nor shall the person be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against his or herself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. Nor shall private property be taken for the public use without any just compensation. This is where a lot of people say, I plead the Fifth, which means you have the right not to answer police questions both in custody or in court if it can incriminate yourself. This right is protected against self-incriminating and extends to states and local judicial systems. Now let me pass it to my girl, Lady K, and she's going to go over the rest of the amendments.
Thanks, Impact. We're going to go right into the next amendment, which is the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment states, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Basically, this is supposed to guarantee the rights of the accused, so they can have a public trial without delay, a lawyer, the right to a jury that won't be one-sided, and give you the right to know who is actually accusing you of these crimes, and show you what evidence they have to support their claim. Also, they have the right to be defended by a lawyer, even if they can't afford one, which we've all heard this before. This is that supposed due process, but some might say it's questionable, especially if you're getting an attorney that's court appointed. Next, we have the Seventh Amendment, which states, in suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in the court of the United States than according to the rules of common law. So this amendment is supposed to mean that the civil cases or lawsuits that are based on a disagreement between people or businesses have a right to be decided by a jury in a federal court. The amount of the lawsuit just has to be more than $20, and after the case is settled, then it shouldn't go back to trial again. Then the Eighth Amendment states, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. This amendment is supposed to protect us from being forced to pay them racks for bail. But if we are accused of a crime, along with getting cruelly punished by the government. Then we have the Ninth Amendment, which states that enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. This is actually said to be one of the most confusing amendments, and you can see why. And it's actually the least referred to. I had to think to myself, what does this even mean? I read quite a bit, and in simple terms, I found was this: all rights not listed in the Constitution belong to the people, not the government. So that's interesting. So the rights of the people are not limited to just the rights listed in the Constitution itself. And we'll have to come back to this one too, as it seems questionable to me. I'm sure if you're like me, you want to know what other rights we have that we may not even know about. And how is the government using that fact that we don't know about them to their own advantage? Maybe there is a reason why they worded it this way. Now, the 10th Amendment and the last amendment I'm going to go over today, it states the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by its states are reserved to the states respectively, or the people. This is supposed to define the rule between the federal government and the states. It says that the federal government has only the power we give them in the Constitution, if you can believe that. These powers include the power to declare war, to collect taxes, to regulate interstate business activities, and those are just a few of the main ones. This one really makes me think, why was the federal government given so much power over us? What were people's mindsets really like back then when they created this? Before the Bill of Rights was put into place, there were very few limits on the power of the national government and how they used their power against the people. Before this was put into place, the government had basically no restrictions and they could do as they pleased. But is that really different from what it's like today? Now, here's Impact with some more information you might find interesting. I know I did.
So, from what I read, it would take quite a lot to change our rights. But the Bill of Rights, sometimes referred to as the Declaration of Rights or Charter Rights, is a list of the most important rights to a citizen of America. The purpose is to protect those rights against infringement from public officials and private citizens. The Bill of Rights may be entrenched or unentrenched. An entrenched Bill of Rights cannot be amended or repealed by the country's legislative branch through regular process. Instead, it requires a supermajority or referendum to do so. This is a part of the American Constitution and has special procedures applicable to constitutional amendments. The Bill of Rights that is not entrenched is a normal statute law and as such can be modified or repealed by the legislative branch as they see fit at will. Although it would be hard to change the actual amendments themselves and the rights that we are given, there's always seemed to be a loophole. We the people need to understand justice and corruption goes hand in hand, and our rights are being infringed upon every day. The craziest thing about it is that the government can restrict our rights at any time. They have to demonstrate that it has a compelling state of interest in which the proposed restriction seeks to protect. One example is the case which legalized a woman's right to obtain an abortion. The Supreme Court said that a woman's right to privacy outweighed the claimed state interest in the matter, or so they say. Another fact to mention about the Second Amendment is nowhere in the Constitution does it says what type of arms that we can bear. New fully automatic weapons or weapons that can reload automatically and fire continuously with one trigger pull have been banned for civilians in the United States since the Firearm Ownership Protection Act of 1986. Also, 7 states have put this law into place banning assault rifles like the AR-15 and the AK-47. The states that includes this law are California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York. The District of Columbia even has the same prohibition on assault rifles. With all these loopholes in place, it kind of makes you wonder if our rights are even safe at all. If you try to protect yourself, will you just be shining a light on yourself for the government to try to find a way to incriminate you even though you're in the right? If these rights can be so easily taken away or changed to serve the purpose of the government, then I ask you, who are these rights protecting? And why do we even have these rights to begin with? So, 2 years ago, back in 2019, I got a disturbing the peace charge. But, I must admit, I know a lot about the law, so I kind of weasel my way down to this. But, okay, so I was placing a wager on some 2K, 19 at the time, This man came in my house, he helped me buy the game and everything, and we started gambling on the game. And I started taxing his ass. Excuse my language, but it is what it is. Like, I started taxing him, luxury tax. Like, I had a 50 burger, 40 burger, 30 burger. Like, the most I win by is no less than 20 points, And of course, like any competitor, that kind of got up under his skin. So one day when I was maximizing his tail, putting 40 points up on that game, right? He got mad and stormed out of my house. Then he calls me up and he says I'll owe him money for the game. So I'm like, all right, why don't you come back to my house, And basically, when he came back to my house, I was in the process of waking up and putting on my clothes and stuff like that. So, I wasn't having it. And then, things got heated. And basically, by me explaining how Buddy was wrong to even ask for the game back and even ask for money about the game, he got up, broke one of my coat hangers and said, man, we could settle this shit right now. And I'm like, all right, well, whatever, And upon doing so, I couldn't find my shoes at the time. So I was like, looking for my shoes. And by that time, Buddy, he got down the street a little ways. Then once I found my shoes, I made sure to grab my taser and grab my hammer, right? And I went down the street to go confront him. Confront. I already know some people going to be like, oh, well, that's stalking. But no, I confronted him because he said we could settle this shit right now, in his own words. Okay, excuse my language once again. So, of course, I went out there, taser, hammer ready, right? And once I got there, Buddy started making a ruckus. The first thing I had to do, excuse my language again, was, hey man, shut the fuck up. You know what I'm saying? And I'm talking to you guys like this right here. Like, I had a little growl in my voice, but that's because, like, I must admit, talking to you all, yeah, I was ready to throw down, But I controlled myself, and, you know what I'm saying? He was like, is that a strap? Is that a strap? So, in order not to get a concealed weapons charge, which is also another loophole out there, I revealed my taser, and also I revealed my hammer. And I said, nah, this ain't a strap. Strap meaning little pistol, a little gun or whatever, a little revolver that, you can take out, whatever in the case may be. So I was like, nah, this ain't it. And I was like, you know what? I want to know why you was acting like that. And of course, Buddy wasn't trying to answer my question, no way. So he was like, call the cops. And, I stood my ground. I stood firm and stuff like that. Because once you say that, then to actually flee the scene of the crime, especially if you're black, right, is probably going to be detrimental. So, of course, the cops showed up. And when they showed up, man, I tell you what, you know, they was like, you're being detained right now. And I'm like, all right, whatever. You know, I'm like, you can't really get me because, first of all, I didn't even hit him. And second of all, I'm allowed to have these. You feel me? And with that being said, right, they confiscated my weapons. Not only did they confiscate my weapons, they put them in the evidence room. Not only did they put them in the evidence room, right, they put a referendum or whatever you want to call it to the judge that they should not return my items to me after the case is resolved. Okay? So, in all actuality, they forced me to go buy another taser, which I have, more voltage, by the way, and they forced me to buy a new hammer. And yes, this is a carpenter hammer, so of course, like, not only am I the hammer man, but, you know, I'm actually repairing even the coat hanger buddy just broke in my house, among other things. So, with that being said, I would like you guys to leave the comment in the bottom if my Second Amendment upon my First Amendment was actually violated.
Well, that's a really interesting story. So, my question is, I just want to ask you guys, and ask you, basically just ask yourself, do you feel like you really have freedom of speech after, I mean, what we brought the facts to your attention here? Do you feel like you really have all the rights that they say that we have? I hope you learned something from this. I mean, like we did. So we ask you to ponder the question: So we ask you to ponder the question: is freedom of speech really free? Please visit us at our website, www.theallstargang.wixsite.com/theallstargang. And thank you, and stay tuned for another episode of You Don't Jazz No Berries.